So this chair is like, the chair is nice, but the position is not good.
So in the last few videos we've been talking about specific charts in Data Studio and some of the best practices and tips that we have for them. And I think we can continue with this series if you...
Can I get a new chair?
Maybe.
Okay.
I would like to go toward Google Maps and GeoMaps because I like them.
What do you like more? Google Maps or GeoMaps?
Google Maps.
Good answer.
Easy.
Good answer.
I think for a long time GeoMaps was the only option available, and then Google Maps was integrated and had a long list of limitations of Google Maps.
What was the biggest limitation?
Biggest limitation was embedded dashboards were not working.
Correct.
So if you were going to use the dashboard in a specific way, Google Maps was not going to be displaying, which was a big no. But I think Google Maps by itself, like the whole customization options that come from Google Maps are then possible within Data Studio. And I think geocharts really seemed like something from a legacy from somewhere way back. Very strict limitations of how what could be shown. Yeah, and the design could not be changed that much. Also, the color palette somehow looked very weird. It really looked like integrating an element from Windows 98 into a dashboard from
It
nowadays.
started with displaying Europe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you had Europe, you had basically whole Europe, including Europe, basically. But what you normally are interested in as a, let's say, German startup, like, is basically western part of Europe, and then basically 2/3 of the whole map you had no data for, which was then a little bit, not that optimal, let's say. Yeah, we tried to then put white boxes over, like we made the GeoChart even bigger, put a white box over like half of the screen to make it a little bit more usable. Now with Google Maps, that problem is gone, and it's way more convenient.
We still have some limitations, no?
So Google Maps you cannot type in a default zoom. So you always have the whole world when you're starting with it, and then then you can handle it as Google Maps. So then you can click on the pluses to zoom in one area and so on. So that's good. But that is, I think, the biggest disadvantage in Google Maps, and that's also the advantage if you want to use GeoMaps. So there you can say you have some regions you can select, for example Europe, Asia, whatever. And also some kind, I think in USA you also have different counties or something, not sure.
States.
States. So that's maybe the only thing. If you really say, okay, I want one special part of the world, then it's maybe useful to use the GeoMap. But also in terms of the styling and so on, I think Google Maps is still a better option.
Yeah, I think on the side of best practices, I would say, unless it's always going to be strictly in one part of the world, I would go for Google Maps all the way. It's also it's a tool that almost everyone in the world knows how to do. And maybe they don't use Google Maps, but any type of map application on their phone has a very similar design and layer of interactions. And then if you go to the dashboard and you see that, you recognize it and you know how to play around with it. If only they had like this predetermined zoom of when it starts, in which position the map begins, then that would be much easier.
Does it only zoom with the plus, or also move the mouse wheel?
With the mouse wheel as well.
Mouse wheel as well.
Yeah, to be honest, but I think we are not really good experts in Google Maps and GeoCharts and so on. And I think the reason is that we also show the data, so country data just in tables, for example. Maybe we put then Ricardo's funny flags emojis on the left, right, whatever. But yeah, I think we don't use that often because
it's not advanced enough at the end. So I mean, you have then Google Maps, you have data inside, you basically display how many orders did I have in in Germany, in France, and so on, and you have different colors. But what kind of information does it really tell you, right? You cannot make it super small and you cannot see something. You need to at least have 1/4 of the whole page. So a lot of space is gone foreseeing different shades of a color, which is then expressing how much sales or other things you basically made. So it's quite limited, I would say, and therefore I normally use the space you have in a better way.
Yeah, I like having the option of something that calls the attention and make the dashboard maybe more attractive to people that are not that used to working with data outside of a spreadsheet, no? And then that gives them something. It's not trying to sound condescending. It's just like really something that looks pretty.
It looks good.
And
Exactly.
then it calls the attention. And then I would say also there's all these tools, no? And then that's where Google Maps functionality comes into place. You can have all this customization of making the map just look nice. And we found that tool. We're gonna add the link because I don't remember exactly the name, but it allows you to make the map just look nice. So Google Maps has all these setups. So within Data Studio, you can select, I think, 4 different looks: either silver, light, dark, and standard or whatever. And then you can go into the Google Maps API setup and connect directly and move exactly everything that you want to show. So you don't show maybe no names at all of cities, only names of countries, different size, different colors, change everything. And then you can make the map match exactly the color scheme that you have. And that makes it really stand out. I think we've seen, even with people that are very data savvy, we've shown them a couple of times these maps, and they're like, that looks nice.
Maybe that would also be a good blog post, right? To explain how we do that, how it could be done.
I also have to get some
that.
experience with that,
Yeah.
because I know this tool, but
Yeah.
I never have so much experience with
So
it.
if we do that at a later point, we will definitely link it in the in the description.
It's a nice tool to play around, and the advantage of this tool, concretely, I mean, it's a website now, and the community creates some, and then they post this the script. I think it's a JSON script that then you can just literally copy and paste inside Data Studio, and your map looks exactly like that. And it's nice. It's not as popular, so I think maybe you have like 20 pages. Of course, you never go beyond 5. Or I think there's a couple of filters, like if you want a more minimalist look or something, and then you can just see which one.
Is that working in embedded mode? You ever tried it?
Now Google Maps works in embedded, and it works like that. Yeah.
So maybe also one thing, why is also Data Studio good, I think, is in terms of handling all of these location data. So you have a lot of possibilities to put in your location data. So for sure you can, for Germany, you can put DE and EN and so on. And it's it's realize what you want to show, or you can type in the whole name of the country. It works, or longitude and longitude and so on. So there are a lot of possibilities. For sure you have to Google for it the first time, also with the ISO codes or the namings and so on. And sometimes you see one country is maybe not recognized or something, then you have to check it. But Data Studio have a lot of possibilities.
I'm not super sure if there's a public data set for exactly those translations between the country code with 2 characters, 3 characters, full name, ISO code, I don't know. We definitely imported that years ago already from some public CSV file or whatever, put it in BigQuery. So if you have, or if you use basically this map function quite a lot, think about to have a standard like table, which you load inside your database once. Let us check if there is a public data set from Google directly, because I'm not quite sure. If, then we can also put the link in the description and make that basically a view to the public data set, or import the CSV if there is no public data set. That you always in BigQuery have this link to connect basically your different ISO codes or 2 character country codes and so on. But that makes really, this saves you a lot of time normally when you have that and when you're used to that.
Yeah.
Speaking about maps, you said already, or you Alex, that we are using those flag icons sometimes. I think that's a good point to maybe give that small tip. It's about tables, but maybe we can quickly explain, Ricardo, because I think when it comes to map functionalities, that's a good way to maybe not use maps, but still show very easily
complemented.
Complemented.
Yeah, I think as with all the time that we talk about charts and elements, when it goes beyond a certain number of elements that are shown at the same time in one visualization, it gets quite quickly hard to grasp what is happening. No.
Also,
so if you have all the countries in the world with all their bubbles, is a bit unwieldy to manage. So that's why we often either focus on a table or complement the map that is then used more for visual appeal with a table that has. And then to make the table also easier to go through, we put this emoji flag of each country that then can go within the dashboard, and we just had a list. We did it once to create this calculated field with the name of the country. When this is Germany is in the name of the country equals and the flag emoji of Germany. And we have just this list that every time we need it, we just copy and paste it and have this as calculated field. And it's just nice. We still show the name of the country, usually, and the flag, because after it's quite quickly you realize how little one knows about flags of the world. And it's nice to have this element as a trivia part. And it's nice just to add a part of the dashboard.
I'm not sure, is BigQuery able to handle emojis? I don't think so, right? I think then it shows the code maybe of the emoji.
I think so, never tried it. But what you definitely can do is, when we talk about this like helper table, where all the country codes and ISO codes of the country and so on are inside, add the URL of the flag, right, to the picture basically. And then if you have this table where for every basically country code you have the URL of the flag, and it's super easy for you in the future to link to that table, and you never need to take care of any URL anymore or any like function. You can then just add it to your order table. So when the order was coming from Germany, for example, then left join your country table, and you always have the URL to the icon of the flag, and you can simply display it.
I'm gonna give a very exciting recommendation, which is to check the documentation. You just go through the documentation and really like these things of depending on the ISO code, 2-letter, 3-letter and stuff, there is a formula to change all of them within Data Studio, and they're constantly making these changes, and it regardless of that. And yes, I mean we try to avoid it because we have it in BigQuery directly. But you can set it as a calculated field that then converts it automatically.
That's interesting, because when you have those workarounds, sometimes you don't realize when also Data Studio makes changes, because you're used to the way you do it, and then sometimes maybe you do it way more advanced or that it need to be at the end.
Yeah, but in general it's a good thing to have, and that's why I always recommend Alex updates on Data Studio and BigQuery series that we release, because then you can see all these new small changes that are coming, because I think that's how I found out about that. Alex just shared the blog post that he had written, and I saw that, I tried it out, and I was like, okay, yeah, sure, it works. It's not exactly how we go forward to it, but it gives you the flexibility.
You forget things like checking updates of Data Studio and BigQuery, even if you know where the link is, or that those updates are there on a weekly basis or daily basis or whatever. Even if you have it bookmarked, you simply sometimes then forget to check it. And if one person, so if your daily business is Data Studio, BigQuery, whatever, connect to our blog post, or have someone in the company who's doing the research themselves, but it definitely makes sense to get kind of pointed to those updates on a weekly basis, because there are so many interesting stuff inside you would never like see and realize, because you have your way of doing it and you stay with that, and sometimes it's with updates way easier to be achieved.
Yeah. Let's go back then towards the best practices maybe of maps and things to consider.
I don't use it that often.
I have
a big contributor of that.
I have a couple other points. Maybe
then
in mind?
you can continue.
I would go towards the best practices of adding the visualization of data through the map itself. No? So you can use in the GeoChart, you can have a shaded area through it, but you can also in Google Maps have these bubbles of different sizes. And then what it allows is to show not just the figure by the size, but you can also have colors. And I think in the case that we had the most success, and the case that I see the map being useful is when we have both the size of these bubbles with colors, and the colors are the warning part of it, no? So it's, I think we're using for shipment, and when it's like the general size of the bubble is the volume of shipments, and the color is if we have a formula there, we have a calculation then that we're making that shows then if there's a warning that should be, no? So then it's easy to see, like if you see a tiny red bubble, it's like, yes, there's delays, but in a small amount of shipments, no? If you see a large yellow one, it's like, there's a lot in this one. And that's how you can move around in this element. So thinking about how the flexibility that you get to communicate data in more levels, that then it's just in a snapshot you can see. Of course you can have it, we have that in a supporting table then showing the information to see exactly the amount of shipments that are late and by how many days. But the person can just open the dashboard and quite quickly, everything is green. It's okay. So thinking about how you can support with that, that's where I would think that's the tool that you get with the maps.
Yeah, so this size of the bubbles you have to be a little bit careful with that, I think, because for example I used the maps one time for our bike share things. So one public data set, which we are also using, for example, for most of the video stuff. When you're showing quickly something, we use mostly the bike share data, which is a public data set, a BigQuery, and that's just in San Francisco. And then, for example, you have the location of the different bike shares, and then you have the capacity of the bike share, so how many bikes you can get there. And that's sometimes a little bit, so, and then I put a map inside and say, okay, show me for every station the amount of available bikes with the size of the bubble. And then, for example, if you have just San Francisco and you put the whole Google Maps inside, you have to click really often on plus and so on to zoom in.
Gotcha.
And then you are always already on the street level and you see all of the streets, and then it's getting then you see.
But put a function inside, right? To only have 3 ranges that basically.
That would maybe.
That would make sense.
Because else you cannot see differences. Then they're overlapping each other and you cannot see something.
Yeah. So in general, as wrap up for the maps topic and the best practices here, I think I would go towards considering like, hey, this is a tool that you can use to convey data in a certain way, being mindful of how like the limitations that it has, but also that it can be useful for people to get it.
And it's a good eye catcher.
Yeah, take into consideration, really go through the data, how it's displayed, and get time to play around with it. So wrapping up, Alex, what can people do to follow more updates?
Shall we already do it? How far we are?
Yeah.
Okay. So then you can check out our Medium blog post for sure. We already did a lot of Data Studio Medium blog posts about data sources and also maps and so on. So we already discovered them. And also, for example, for sure, check out our YouTube other videos, subscribe to it, click on the, how's it called, the alarm?
The ringing bell.
Ringing bell.
I don't know.
Yeah, so check it out.
Perfect. Thank you.
See you. Bye bye.
Nice.